So that's why I designed Sensate, so that you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You don't even have to follow something.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you're asked to do something, even something as simple as listen or watch something, it activates the part of the brain that makes you worry about whether or not you're achieving it properly.
Yeah,
and I really wanted to switch that whole mechanism off in people.
Listen up, ladies. If you listen to these episodes but wonder how the hell to implement all the stuff I talk about, I am offering you the chance to join the biggest free of charge live training event I have ever offered. In order to heal one part of ourselves, we have to heal the whole self. And from Monday, the 7th of November, the Uncover Your Purpose training will begin, where I'll be offering 3 30-minute intensive and interactive online live training sessions to teach you exactly how to alchemize your life. For those who turn up live for all 3 of the remote trainings and get involved in the challenges I'll set, there will be incredible prizes and incentives. And I'm talking really worth your while. It is completely free, no strings attached. You just have to show up and make that commitment to your growth. If you want to find your purpose, get healthy, get happy, and start manifesting the hell out of life, click the link in the show notes and register now. Welcome back to Reconditioned. Thank you for being here once again. So I have just got off a recording with Stefan Chmelik, who is the inventor of Sensate, who you will, if you listen to this a lot and you've listened to this season, you will recognize the name because they have been sponsoring this season. Because after I started using it, when a friend told me about it at the Health Optimization Summit and I went and tried it out and then bought one immediately, I got in touch with them to partner with them because it's one of the most amazing pieces of health tech I have ever come across, and I try quite a lot of health tech, as you know. My love for it is not because it deepens my meditation, because it does, and for me that's one of the most important things it does for me personally. My love for it is because of what it has done for people who don't find that meditation comes easily to, meditation doesn't come as easily to anyone. And if you listen to this episode, you'll hear us talking about that. But for the people who suffer with anxiety, for the people who life feels difficult for, and anxiety is just kind of another thing in your life that's there all the time, this is what the Sensate is helping people with, and this is what I'm grateful to Stefan for. It is using infrasonic technology to stimulate or to activate the vagus nerve, to calm the autonomic nervous system. You don't have to do anything. You switch this thing on, you put it on your chest, you follow the app music that is connected, resonates with the infrasonic technology for 10 minutes, and boom, your anxiety levels have dropped. So I'm in love with this thing, and I let everyone who I come across use it because I take it everywhere I go. And this episode was such a great insight for me into how this thing was built, into how Stefan came up with the idea for the Sensate, why it's so important, why so many people are loving it. So if you suffer with anxiety, please listen. If you, like me, are a meditator and you would like to deepen your meditation practice, please listen. And if you know nothing about anything I'm talking about, but would like to enhance your growth and improve your health and well-being, please listen. So that was this episode. I think you're going to love it. And the information about the Sensate with a discount is obviously in the show notes. And in other news, if you haven't yet heard, I have released a free journaling mini course to help you get started on your journaling journey. Please check out the show notes for that. All you need to do is literally open the link and register. It's a totally free course with some incredible content. Just because it's free, don't discount that the content is great and full of little nuggets of wisdom that will help you on your journaling journey. And of course, my free 3-day training challenge. I Uncover Your Purpose challenge is starting very soon. So again, link in the show notes to get yourself registered for that. There's going to be some incredible prizes available. And honestly, it will help you really start scratching the surface and getting beneath that surface and figuring out what is your purpose and how the hell do you get to it. So that is all from me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. As usual, please be in touch. Let me know how you feel about the episode, what you think about the episode, and feel free to leave a review, because why not? Let's pay it forward. Stefan Chmelik is a health visionary, stress response expert, lifelong meditator, founder of London's Harley Street New Medicine Group, and the inventor of the Sensate technology. Stefan is a technology innovator and physician with 30 years clinical experience, working with tens of thousands of patients experiencing stress and anxiety. He is now entirely devoted to leveraging his significant and unique experience towards achieving maximum impact for Sensate as the ideal customer solution. So welcome, Stefan.
Laura, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get into the Sensate and everything about it, and kind of how you came to it. But I always start by asking the same question, which is, what have you done so far today to support your wellness?
You mean literally today?
Literally today. What's on your morning routine?
It does vary a little bit, but today I have been in the cold tub. I like to do some cold exposure, which is an interesting subject in itself about actually who that's suitable and who it isn't suitable for, because it's not suitable for everybody. I've done half an hour of meditation, which isn't every day, but on Thursdays, actually, I am part of a silent meditation group. So we sit there, not saying anything, with a bit of chanting, which is nice. I've had a Sensate session, as I do every day. I've done a small amount of yoga, did some kind of stretching and stuff. And at the moment, I've created a kind of ceremonial cacao, medicinal mushroom and fat drink, a kind of bulletproof-ish, but with a lot of mushrooms in it, which I'm taking, which is great.
Oh, I'm a big mushroom fan. And I'm also a big Sensate fan, as you know. So let's get on to that. But you mentioned about cold exposure, and I know my audience are really interested in this. We speak about it a lot because I recently interviewed Kristen Whitesell, who's a leading female biohacker, and we talk about the difference between men and women and the things that our bodies need differently. So when we're engaging in something like keto or fasting or cold exposure, how it is different for men and women. And you just mentioned getting into the ice tub. My husband's also got an ice tub outside. What are your thoughts on that, just out of interest, because you touched on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the basis of anything, any kind of holistic practice, is that it's about the individual. So, there is no one diet that suits everyone. There's no one vitamin or vitamin regime that everyone needs to take, or one dietary regime that everyone needs to do. And that, I think, is the tricky bit, is being able to, for the person, the individual, being able to differentiate between what they personally feel they need versus what's actually more of a craving.
Right. Yes.
Or indeed peer pressure, because nobody needs sugar or a chocolate bar, but actually we can really feel like we do sometimes, right? So that's kind of the difference between sort of really listening to the body on a deep level, an intuitive level, and going with what the brain chemicals, the chemicals are telling us that we want to do. I mean, I think that if we kind of simplify, I think cold exposure, there's some really, really good evidence for it. It's one of the things actually that there's some solid evidence for in terms of longevity. Along with calorie restriction, which isn't the same as dieting at all. But those are probably the two items that have the most evidence for long-term health and longevity. But being a Chinese medicine practitioner at heart, we're also really well schooled and versed in the idea of what suits the individual, what's constitutionally appropriate. And Southeast Asian medicine particularly is very prone to being cautious about cold exposure, damp exposure, and wind exposure. Now, part of that's obviously traditional, because for thousands of years those were real issues. And obviously in the West generally, and in the developed countries generally, that isn't such a problem now. But, once you go outside and you expose yourself to cold, then, your central heating and what have you doesn't really count anymore. So if somebody is ill, they're constitutionally quite weakened following an illness or in general, or they are very prone to feeling the effects of cold, then cold exposure probably isn't for them. And if you basically continue to feel cold after being in a cold environment, you don't actually, obviously you feel cold at the time, but if you don't start to warm up after having dried yourself off, then again, metabolically, it's probably not right for you. Mm-hmm. So you will continue to lose body heat for about 20 minutes afterwards, which is why it's really important to dry yourself off and get into dry clothes. But if you continue to feel cold after that, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Interesting. Really interesting.
Which is, there is the shiver response, of course, because it's about the mobilization of brown adipose and white adipose tissue, wat and bat, and particularly between the shoulder blades where a lot of that stuff is stored. So the shiver response is an indication of metabolic change. So you kind of do want to shiver, ideally. But you shouldn't, of course, be going into a long-term shivering, half an hour later. That's not helpful.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for that. So you've obviously got this huge depth of knowledge when it comes to health. Where did that start? And take us through your history a little bit, because I think it gives great context for when we go into what you do now and what you're doing with the Sensate.
Oh, well, thank you. I've been immersed in natural healthcare, holistic healthcare, lifelong, really. So Dad was a kind of self-taught homeopath, naturopath. So we were kind of brought up really within that context, so unvaccinated. I've never been vaccinated for anything, as it happens, by my dad's choice, and I've continued that thereafter. And also Eastern philosophy was something that was in the house. Buddhist philosophy, Sufi philosophy was very much around. Dad was an early follower of one of the Gurdjieff groups, which is quite an esoteric tradition within Sufism. And I ran a number of businesses, but I started practicing Chinese medicine, trained for 7 years, started practicing Chinese medicine about 30 years ago. And it really kind of felt like coming home, really. The concepts didn't feel at all alien. They felt very natural, and I was absolutely drawn to them and understood the way that Chinese medicine has this natural affinity with the environment, with the elements, with the change of seasons. And I feel very strongly that that's something that we've really lost contact with in the developed world, and something which we're now seeing, I think, that is actually the thing we need to go back to: nature exposure, understanding the elements. It was the full moon, the hunter's moon, a few days ago. And noticing that, noticing the phases of the moon, noticing the change of seasons. In fact, we were just talking the other day, but in Japan, they have 72 micro seasons. So there's this really, really nuanced recognition of almost daily change in what's going on around you. So when the insects start chirping is one season. When such and such a bird arrives, there's another season. It's every few days there's this gradual recognition.
I love that.
It's a gorgeous thing, isn't it? So Dad taught me and my brother to meditate when I was very young, 5 or 6 or something like that. So I've been meditating for a long time as well, and using breath work. I meditated with a number of masters, including John Kabat-Zinn, who is the originator of what we call mindfulness within the context of his work, and extended retreats. So that's kind of informed my practice for a great many years. Is how can we use breathwork and meditation to enable people to transcend and ascend.
So you brought up the ever contentious subject of vaccines, which I'm happy you did, because it's always interesting when it comes up. I'm just interested, as someone who's never been vaccinated, for my audience who might be questioning. So no, I was vaccine injured, and that's where I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis just before my 2nd birthday as a result of vaccine being a catalyst that triggered the autoimmune response. So I was vaccinated. My children are not, but I wonder, as someone who has never been vaccinated, because I don't have that experience myself, how that fared for you during childhood and now in terms of your immune system.
Yeah. So it was never a decision to not be vaccinated. Dad just, the family just simply didn't vaccinate me or my brother. So I've never been, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm just not vaccinated, which is, I think is a little bit different. I would like to think that I review the evidence as time goes on. So, any new vaccine or any new situation or any place that I might want to go and live in is different and presents different risks. And for me, it's all about, most decisions actually are about risk judgment. I think we have a warped sense of what risk is now. Human beings are naturally not very good at the best of times at determining risk. For me, there wasn't really much of a basis to have the vaccine, the more recent vaccines, because the results didn't seem to have a verifiable enough difference to the outcomes.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so you've founded quite a few health-related companies, and now obviously, and been working in health and well-being for most of your life. And now your focus is on the Sensate. So I'd love for you to talk us through what the Sensate is, because as you know, I'm a huge fan. I use the Sensate daily. I take it with me wherever I go. So I'm always you'll always find me somewhere. Sometimes I work from this co-working space, and you'll always kind of find me sitting around somewhere using the Sensate, meditating or breathing. So and everyone looks at it and they're like, what is that? And then they all try it for 10 minutes and subsequently go on to buy one. So I'd love for you to talk us through what it is and what it does and what the purpose of it is and how you actually came up with the idea.
Yeah, we've been using sound. That's the cat.
That's right. We're cool with animals here. It's all good.
Trying to get into the
real
room.
Life. This is real life.
Well, it's normally naked children running past as well. I've been using sound, as I say, all my life in meditation and breathing work, but in my professional work as well for many, many decades. That included sound technology. So I started putting speakers under pillows on the treatment couch. A long time ago, and it kind of evolved from there really. So I started experimenting with having bigger speakers and bigger transducers, in the couch, etc. And then a number of years ago, one of my doctor colleagues, we were developing a IV range for a very upmarket Swiss clinic. And they had this technology there, and he rang me up and said, well, you've got to see this. This is really convincing. So I had a look at what they were using, and it was a large kind of sound bed, a zero gravity sound bed with big transducers built onto it, and you lay on it and had a big computer, used headphones, and it was fantastic. It was developed for the US Army, for soldiers returning back from Iran and Iraq in particular with PTSD and anxiety and insomnia and chronic pain states. And it had fabulous results for that, really remarkable results. So we started using it in clinic. We also started seeing these incredible outcomes, which we weren't able to achieve really with other things in anywhere near the same kind of time. And I was sitting on that one day, and I had this kind of eureka moment. The whole kind of concept and the patent and the blueprints and everything were kind of downloaded in this moment. And I realized that we could miniaturize the device by flipping it onto the front of the body. And using the body as the instrument, and that's really that's the innovative step, if you like. That the pebble, the device, obviously I have one here, goes on the chest, as you know very well, and it emits infrasound, so low frequency sound. So we write these compositions, which you wear headphones and you listen to the audio part. From the app, you choose the track in the app and you listen to that, and that's synchronized with the infrasound component, which is not just simply the bass end. It took us 3 years to work out how to create infrasound content that resonates in the right kind of way with the right kind of frequencies and for the kind of outcomes that we're looking to achieve. But by putting it on the chest, you can't really hear it, as you know, but it resonates into the chest via bone conduction and turns the thorax into like a speaker. So a bit like, you can have a beautiful speaker, but unless you've also got a beautiful, nice, resonant, probably wood speaker cabinet around it, the sound isn't going to be great. So your chest is very much like that speaker cabinet. And the point about that also, what's lovely about that is that everybody wearing it will experience a kind of bespoke experience based on their own chest architecture, their bone density, the volume of airspace within the chest, the ratio between where the diaphragm is, the lungs, the heart, etc. And it produces this kind of almost whole body experience. So it's very much like an immersive. So it turns normal music into very deeply immersive music. The most kind of common parallels people give are like being at a sound bath, or a flotation tank, or having a cat on your chest purring. These are the kind of the sort of similes that people often use to describe what the experience is like. And I started using this with people in clinic. We ran thousands of sessions, and it was designed to work in 20 minutes. But actually, we found that within 10 minutes, we were seeing measurable changes to subjective and objective biomarkers like heart rate variability, pulse rate, respiratory capnography, and a bunch of other factors. So the use case, what we ask people to do is 10 minutes once a day, and because it's really pleasant to use. It's not an unpleasant.
Doesn't feel like a chore, no.
It doesn't feel like a chore. It's actually really quite nice. People really look forward to it. A lot of people ran many sessions in a day because they enjoy the experience. And I think really importantly, it doesn't require any expertise. And so that's. There's that in itself is an interesting point, but for me, it's about the numbers. Yeah, so we're not really here to help people who can already meditate. Of course, we have a great number of existing meditators, and in fact, Buddhist monks and people that use it, and they say it transforms their experience more speedily. I'm not sure why Buddhist monks need to get to that place more quickly, but people, even experienced meditators find it takes them into a meditation flow state more quickly than if they're just using themselves.
Okay, so one of the challenges I hear from you guys the most is how hard it is to drop into meditation, or even to relax and just feel calm. And I speak a lot here about how our bodies have not evolved to manage the level of stress we're faced with today, which means we're constantly in fight or flight mode with our sympathetic nervous systems always activated, which we know leads to depression and anxiety and also chronic health problems. If we want to be well, we have to find ways to mitigate this. We have to do that ourselves. And I believe in merging natural daily practices with the kind of health tech that enables us to counter and mitigate the challenges that modern life throws at us. And the Sensate is one of those products, and I want to tell you about it. So the Sensate is a small palm-sized device that sends infrasonic waves through the chest in order to activate the vagus nerve and calm the autonomic nervous system, which is the body's command center. Together with the specially composed hemispheric audio within the app, you will literally feel calmer after only a short session. I give this to anyone I'm with if I have it on me, which I usually do, and everyone has the same response. It's amazing, and I already feel less stressed, and where can I get one? Now, I'm particularly recommending the Sensate to anyone who suffers from anxiety and wants to help calm the nervous system, those who want to deepen their meditation practice, and people who are looking for ways to be calmer and more grounded. Now, most of you know I work with a shaman, and he has taught me that our higher intelligence places ideas of health technology in the minds of those who can create and invent these products. And I truly believe this to be the case with things like the Aura Ring, the Somavedic, even diagnostic devices in hospital. And for me, I believe that to be true with the Sensate. We have lived for too long in a high stress state. We need more to help us counter that. So you can get £20 off the Sensate by visiting getsensate.com. That's GETSENSATE.com and using the code Lauren20. That's getsensate.com and the code Lauren20. Thank you to Sensate for partnering with Reconditioned. And now back to the episode. That's what I find. I've been meditating for 20 years and it definitely deepens my meditation practice. And what I've found as well is that sorry to interrupt you, but this is just an interesting point, something that I've kind of experimented with. I might do like a 10-minute session with the Sensate to kind of get me just like calming down into that alpha brainwave state, like which I might do breath work for sometimes before my meditation, but sometimes I might just do the Sensate and then go into my standard kind of meditation practice without the Sensate, because I feel like I'm in a better place to do that. I've kind of, it's broken breaks the state between being in the beta, heightened brainwave states and bringing back down into alpha, and maybe possibly even to theta, and being able to really for me, it deepens my meditation practice for sure.
No, and that's wonderful to hear. And the main outcomes that people report are obviously deepened meditation, heightened relaxation, reduction in anxiety, but also, as I think you were kind of touching upon, improvement to sleep. There's a lot. This chronic sleep issues are endemic. The percentage of the population that has difficulty sleeping is insane. And I think for me, we live in a very unnatural, very hyper-stimulated environment that no human beings have ever lived before. So much and so many of the kind of natural support mechanisms that we would have had, communities, extended families, elders, a dozen other things have been removed. Our access to nature and being aware of the seasons has been largely removed. Our comfort levels have increased significantly, and that's really important actually from an anti-fragility point of view. And comfort is the enemy of anti-fragility. So I'm quite big on the idea of people removing comforts from their life. And it's not the same as resilience. Resilience can be useful, but anti-fragility is a uniquely biological metric, if you like, whereas you can make a very resilient machine. You can't make an anti-fragile machine. Anti-fragile meaning that it gets stronger because of challenge.
So what sort of things are you removing comfort-wise then, just out of interest?
Well, so regulated cold exposure. So turning, you don't need to sit in your sitting room in winter with a t-shirt on, and the heating up full. So turn the heating down. Turn some of the lights off. For multiple reasons. You really don't want overhead light during the day, or certainly and blue light, etc. But also allow your brain and your more primitive parts of your brain and nervous system to cope with lower light levels. Don't be okay about having to take a moment for your eyes to adjust and to walk around your house with less light available. Be okay being hungry sometimes. We use these terms, don't we? Like, I'm starving, but
right.
How many of us have ever actually been starving? I mean, probably very few. In fact, what we mean is I'm peckish. But so there's lots of things which which are very comforting. But the problem with comfort is you can never have too much. There's no such thing as too much comfort. As soon as you have this new comfort level, you just want more anyway. And it just makes you less and less adaptable. Because then when something changes, which it will, because that's the only universal law, is the one of impermanence, then you're less able to adapt.
Yeah. I agree about the heating as well. I think it just totally messes with the thyroid and the adrenals, and we have to have it on sometimes when it's really, really cold, but maybe just a short spurt of it here and there, and wear a jumper and maybe hold a hot water bottle if it's really, but the central heating does us so much damage.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of central heating. We have it and we turn it on, a couple of times a day, I think. But yeah, put on a jumper and grab a blanket.
Yeah, totally. So what happens physiologically with the Sensate? What's actually happening in the body when we're using it?
That's such an interesting question. I mean, we have ideas and we have some evidence, and we're doing more research to determine absolutely from a biological point of view what's happening. And what we do know is that sound travels very efficiently and very fast through water. And the body is at least 75 and up to 96% water. So a bit like sonar, when you ping a low frequency sound through bone conduction into the chest, into the body, it pings that through the entire water mechanism of the body, which is really the connective tissue, the fascia. Fascia is essentially water in a thixotropic state, water bound into a gel form. Yeah, so this, and you probably know what fascia is. It's the kind of connective tissue that wraps around everything, goes literally everywhere. Lots of evidence now from Helen Longervan and other people that it's where the acupuncture meridians travel. And it's interesting that in Chinese medicine, they talk about the meridians in terms of water. They call them streams and rivers and and seas. We've tended to think that's metaphorical, but actually it's possible it was much more literal than that. So you have these kind of water channels going around the body, and they propagate sound incredibly well. So sound in water travels at about 1,500 meters a second, whereas nerve conduction speed is about 330 meters a second. So in other words, sound is traveling through your body 5 times faster than nerve conduction speed. So you feel the sound before your nerves tell you it's happened.
Wow.
And so this propagation and it's like dropping a pebble into a pond, these ripples. And that's really how Sensate's working. We're getting these ripples of infrasound combined, obviously, with the stuff that's affecting working on the brain directly via audio sound, air compression sound in the ears. And the combination of those two things are activating the sound receptors, but also the physical body sound receptors. My feeling is that when we're listening to music, we're really only experiencing half of sound, because sound is so much about the felt sense as it is about the heard sense. As we know from a concert, as we know from bands that use big speakers, and church organs. Actually, church organs are written. The music for church organs is written with 2 octaves which are below hearing threshold.
Really? So
there's, as you know, in England, we're blessed with a great number of large cathedrals and churches. I do pilgrimages between them, because the roots are very, very ancient roots. They're much older than the churches, these pathways. The churches were built onto these roots rather than the other way around. And I've got a few of the organists to kind of, show me their organs, as it were, and play these really, really low 2 octaves. And it's true, you don't hear them. They go, but then you start to feel the building move. And there is not a vast amount, but we're looking into it. There is some research that indicates that infrasound, low frequency sound, is one of the prime movers of the sensation of awe. So for things to be awe-inspiring, they're very, very commonly associated with infrasound.
So interesting. Never knew that about church organs, or that churches were built on these, on these energy.
Well, it's why you almost always get really old elm trees in churchyards, which are older than the church, because the sites were built by, Druids worshipped at them, but even prior to that, prior to the Druids, most of these sites were sacred sites.
Yeah. So I know that the Sensate also works by activating the vagus nerve. And I'd love you to talk us through that kind of in a really tangible sense, what it's doing with the autonomic nervous system, exactly why it's reducing anxiety for anyone listening who, for me, I've been recommending the Sensate particularly to friends or colleagues or clients that I work with who suffer with anxiety. So I'd love you to take us really into how it works on that level.
Yeah, so the vagus wanders, or vagus literally means wander in Greek. And it goes, all over the body, starting in the brainstem and going down through the neck and all through all the organs. And that's kind of the point, really. It's the 10th cranial nerve. It's the largest branch of the autonomic nervous system. And it innervates directly all the viscera, all the organs. Yeah. And it's via the organs that we experience many of our emotions and feelings and sensations. We tend to think of the brain as being really where all thinking and feeling takes place. But, we now know that there are 3 or 5, depending on how you want to categorize it, brains in the body, including the enteric nervous system and the cardiac nervous system. There's at least 3, and there's a number in the head, really. There's not really one brain in the head. So, it's our body really that feels and remembers. And we know this within trauma therapy. So anyone who's versed in trauma resolution will know that the memories around trauma tend to be held in the body. They're not really thoughts. So, which is why talking-based therapy is of quite limited impact on those kind of issues, because talking around it doesn't really transform anything, whereas body-orientated psychotherapies can be deeply transformative. So that's why we're putting low-frequency sound, this enjoyable kind of resonance into the body. So it's being felt by the cells in the body, it's being felt by the fascia, and the vagus nerve, amongst other places, runs just behind the sternum here. So although you can't contact the vagus nerve electrically here, and you wouldn't stick an electrical device on your chest anyway, you can contact the vagus nerve using sound. So I write about the distinction between vagus nerve toning and vagus nerve stimulation, because I think they're very different things. So vagus nerve stimulation is an increasingly large medical speciality. There's a number of technologies and devices which stimulate the vagus nerve electrically, either implantable devices like pacemakers, items which you kind of use on the neck or the head or the ear, there's some really great results for things like epilepsy, migraine. They're now researching them for autoimmune conditions and many other things. But the thing about electricity is, it's kind of like making a frog's legs twitch. You can make things contract and stimulate them. You can't really increase anti-fragility in a system by running electricity through it. So as everything I do is about trying to increase resilience and anti-fragility, sound appears to be, from all our research and our patient and user experience, a much more viable mechanism for creating autonomic flexibility. So that's really what it's about. And the vagus nerve is really the way, a very efficient way to describe this idea of autonomic flexibility, the ability to upregulate and downregulate. So as you know, the autonomic nervous system controls all those body functions which you can't think about consciously. Like the heartbeat and the sweating and the blood pressure and breathing and peristalsis. Breathing, of course, is the exception, because it's the only one you can consciously and subconsciously impact, which is why it's so important. So you can't kill yourself by holding your breath, because when you faint, your autonomic nervous system will take over. But you can stop yourself from breathing, and this is what happens with stress and trauma, is we tend to do a number of things, but typically we hold our breath and similar, and that becomes a pattern then, which is why body work and body-orientated work is the solution. So with Sensate being where it is, over the thymus, over the center of the chest, it's the vagus nerve, the whole autonomic nervous system, but also the heart and the lungs and the diaphragm are very much within that kind of beacon of sonic resonance, sonic massage, if you like. And its impact is based really on the kind of things that human beings have been doing for thousands of years, all by themselves without anyone having to tell them to. So singing, chanting, omming, humming, all these things are things which, every culture on the planet has found a way to do to make their chest hum and resonate, because it makes us feel better. It makes us feel good. Cats purr at 33 hertz, which is near infrasonic, because they do that when they're happy or when they're injured and they're trying to heal. NASA is using 33 hertz now for astronauts in space, because bone density loss is a real issue when you can't do weight-bearing exercise. So it's we've used ultrasound. There's been much more research into the use of medical ultrasound, so high frequency sound, but there's been much less research into the use of low frequency sound, which is what we're doing. So it's a way, so if we look at it in the simplest way of looking at it, and the way I like to look at it, is it's a way of very safely duplicating the kind of things that human beings have found ways to do themselves, to make their chest resonate, to make them feel good, to improve vagal nerve tone, heart rate variability because of the location. But using Sensate enables people to do it reliably, safely, consistency, and without 10 years of practice.
So if someone's listening who is maybe not a meditator, someone that's very anxious, suffers with anxiety, has found meditation hard, lots of thoughts, finds it hard to relax, is not necessarily a person that is doing a lot of breath work or a lot of, any of this work at all, perhaps, but wants to find ways to reduce that anxiety. Will the Sensate work, and how will it make them feel after a session?
The basic answer is the vast majority of people do feel different after a first 10-minute session, which is what it was designed to do, and it does that. There's two things I kind of point out which I think are important, which is to not feel anxious in the modern world implies, in my opinion, a strong degree of denial. We're living in crazy times, times that are unique. The world has never been this threatened, if you like. We genuinely are in a situation where the world could be destroyed at any time in the next 10 years. And we've never really been in that place before. So that's highly anxiety provoking. So if you're not feeling anxious about that, then you're not listening.
Yeah, but I do think that there are people who are operating from a consistently hyper anxious state where they can't function because it sounds so, I might be anxious about, what something that makes me anxious, just as a random example is, my kids are 7 and 4, but I'm anxious about them becoming teenagers and wanting phones and screens and what's going to happen to them when they're on the online world. That's anxiety inducing. But I'm talking about the people who are kind of the small things in life create anxiety for them because that's, just kind of how their life has become, perhaps because of trauma, perhaps because they've never had enough access to know how to manage their emotions. But as a first step, for me, the Sensate seems like a really good first step because I've given it to people to just try, anxious people, and it has really calmed them down, and they've gone on to buy it and say that it is really the thing that has become, their go-to. And so I'm talking about kind of people who operate from that space that find it very hard to meditate or very hard to calm their thoughts. That I think it would, it's pretty beneficial for, not just, the expert meditators or the monks.
Well, I think we need to acknowledge that meditation is incredibly difficult.
It is, yeah, because we're not given those resources.
It's difficult for anyone. It's always been difficult. I don't think we say that enough. That actually it's the simplest and the hardest thing you will ever do. Doing nothing is incredibly difficult.
It really is. I say this all the time. I say this, when I'm teaching meditation on my course, I say to my clients, when you're talking about how difficult it is because thoughts come to you, I've been meditating for 20 years since I was 18. And I can tell you that the way my meditation looks inside my head probably doesn't look too different to how your meditation looks right now. It's just the act of doing it, the simple act of actually just consciously doing it that creates the changes in your health and in your physiology.
We know what I found about 10 years ago, that it's even more than that. It's what I call the dark side of mindfulness, which is that a really quite significant proportion of people actually feel worse when they try to relax or meditate or even use an app to make them help them breathe and be, follow a mindfulness program. And that isn't that surprising. If as many of us are running around coping from being overwhelmed by being super busy, and then if you say to somebody, if you want somebody to have a panic attack, just ask them to look at their breathing.
Right.
Because most people are hyperventilating or mouth breathing to a large extent. Virtually, feeling overwhelmed and anxious is pretty much ubiquitous, and most people are. It's only really by how much. So to then suddenly say to somebody, "Okay, lovely, sit down and notice your thoughts and empty your mind," although of course, as you know, emptying the mind isn't actually part of meditation, but of course, they a lot of them, I think, and then they're going to worry, "Oh, am I doing it right?" So it's very common for people to torture themselves about, whether they're meditating properly. So I had for years, I had loads of people coming to me and saying, "Oh, I tried to do that 10-minute thing you asked me to do, but I just sat there waiting for it to finish and being anxious and thinking about all the things I had to do." And so that's why I designed Sensate, so that you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You don't even have to follow something.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you're asked to do something, even something as simple as listen or watch something, it activates the part of the brain that makes you worry about whether or not you're achieving it properly.
Yeah,
and I really wanted to just switch that whole mechanism off in people.
So the Sensate will work then regardless of whether you're there trying to meditate on the music or trying to relax. It's just working regardless of what your brain's doing.
Yeah, exactly. It works whether you kind of want it to or not, almost. I mean, of course you want it to, but it's not really about what you do. And you if you want to, you can sit there noticing your breathing, but you don't have to. And most people don't bother. They just most people fall asleep. Actually, is the most common response.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, it's a great piece of health tech. I'm so grateful to you for bringing it to us. Who creates the music? How has that happened? Because I always find that very interesting in terms of like the tracks are very intentional. My favorite one's the H2O, and actually I have a request for you. Really important request.
Yeah.
H2O is only 10 minutes. I need that one to be 20 minutes.
Yeah, funny you should say that. We're before the end of the year, there will be different versions, but also a bunch of new tracks coming out.
Oh, I'm so excited. I've used all of them, but I have my 3 favorites, H2O, The Forest, and Somnolence.
Okay.
Those are my favorites, but H2O is my ultimate favorite. For some reason, that track does something to me every time. But then I get brought out of it when it finishes. I need it to be longer. So that's my request for you.
No, we're working on that, actually. We should be able to do exactly that quite shortly. I mean, the tracks, so when I'm out in nature, which is a lot, I pilgrimage a lot, like I say, I do a lot of long distance walking in nature as much as possible. I was on Dartmoor 2 weeks ago when there was no moon and, without any electric light, and I can confirm it gets really, the removal of electric light actually is one of the most interesting anti-fragility tools. You realize how dependent we've become on electric, just being able to, even if it's only a torch, right? Just being able to turn that on. But anyway, I record, I've got my mic and my equipment, so I record a lot of sound in nature. So birds, water, rain. I was on Orford Ness recently. I don't know if you know that, off the Suffolk coast, recording a lot of very, very unique sounds there, and that's one of the new tracks that's going to be released. So I see these kind of stories about the atmosphere that we're trying to create, and then there's some composers that I work with. The guy that kind of lives up a tree pretty much, who sort of channels a lot of this sound. So we work together as a unit, creating the ambience and the atmosphere, which I've picked up and recorded. And we're increasingly mixing in spatial sound. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but quite a nice way to think about that is like, old-fashioned mono, that's like one-dimensional, and then we got stereo, which is two-dimensional, but still completely unnatural, two sources of sound. And then spatial sound is like three-dimensional sound, so it's mixing in 360 degrees. So you've got a bird up here, and you've got a rustle down there. You've got sound all around you. And then if you add Sensate into that, you then get four-dimensional sound. So you then have immersive, multi-sensory experience, which is more powerful, therefore.
So it feels intentional. So I always wondered kind of how that process came together.
Yeah, and if I'm going to write an article about how we create a Sensate track,
amazing.
What the process is, what the inspiration is. There is a lot of science in it, but it's quite intuitive science. We have, we've got loads of graphs and stuff that we use, and lots of high-tech equipment that we use. But ultimately, what it comes down to is me experiencing something and then working out how to translate that into this sonic infrasound and audio experience. And then listening to the track and seeing whether it reproduces that same kind of emotional and physical outcome.
What I love, I talk about this a lot, that for me, health tech has become a thing that has, and biohackers use the word biohacks, and all these hacks we have, that modern life and technology have done a lot to have brought harm to our lives. However, we can then use technology to then mitigate that harm. And I feel like with the Sensate and with generally kind of these amazing health tech products that we I used to think, why do I want to use more technology? I want to get away from technology. I just want to meditate with nothing. But actually, especially for the people who are on these kind of feeling very anxious a lot of the time, we can utilize those biohacks, this health technology, to mitigate the effects of modern life and what it's doing for us. And the Sensate's really done that. So thank you for that.
No, you're absolutely welcome. And I think that's exactly right. And the point is, you can't uninvent anything.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter how evil I tell you your smartphone is, nobody's going to throw it away. No, because it's too useful. And if people are, most people are working from home or at home, are unable to leave or anxious or don't have the kind of it's all very well for me to say, oh yeah, great, just get out into the forest and do some forest bathing, and you'll be just sleep under a tree. It's all very well to say that, but that's not available for a lot of people. Either literally not available, or the idea of it is too scary.
Yeah.
So technology, and this is my vision, that technology can be the bridge to these kind of resources for people.
Yeah.
So my vision with Sensate is to have positively impacted the lives of 100 million people by 2025. And users have now run 25 million minutes of Sensate time. So we are moving in that direction. And we did a bit of maths the other day, and we worked out it would have taken me 378 years in clinic seeing patients to have had the same impact that we've already had with Sensate. So for me, and for me, it's all about the impact. It's all about the volume, the numbers of people that we have to help become self-regulating, so they're not locked into this kind of fear cycle, short-term fear cycle. We need people to be thinking longer term if we want to see the kind of positive outcomes that are needed.
I love that. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so all about you, rapid fire round. Are you ready?
Go.
All right, the first one's always the same. Wellness is
feeling harmonious, feeling content.
I would agree. One thing that everyone should start doing to improve their well-being.
Walking.
Quick answer, short and sweet. Where do you see health tech taking us in the next 10 years?
I think it's got to become empathic. Yeah, we have to be in charge of it. Also, our data. We have to own our data.
Yes, so important. And lastly, if you could raid one person's brain and retain all their information, who would it be? Oh dear.
Nikolai Tesla.
Oh, yeah. I actually saw a post about him yesterday that he had all these incredible ideas, and he was a genius, and he was way ahead of his time, and yet he still died unknown in poverty.
Well, and Edison got most of the credit for his inventions. Yeah, I mean, Edison basically was good at patenting. It's often the way. I mean, Tesla was clearly on the spectrum, as am I, as are most creatives. And I think one of the things that's really important for healing society is that we welcome the idea of people who are on the spectrum, people who are neurodiverse, back into our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Stefan, thank you so much for your time. But for this incredible piece of health technology that is helping so many people. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you so much.
And for anyone who's interested, all the information about the Sensate will be in the show notes. So make sure to head there for a sweet little discount on the Sensate as well.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reconditioned. I am honestly so grateful to each and every person that tunes in. Thank you also for taking responsibility for your own well-being. You should know that just by choosing to listen to podcasts like this that further your well-being, you're moving more deeply into abundance consciousness. Now, don't forget, I have a bunch of free resources over at laurenvakneen.co.uk, as well as every recommendation you could ever need in regards to your well-being on the LV Recommends page, all categorized for your ease. Thank you also to our sponsors. These episodes would not be possible without them, so make sure to check them out and get some pretty awesome discounts on the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get updated each time a new one is released. Thank you. I appreciate you. Reconditioned is proud to be working with Women for Women International, a charity that supports women survivors of war in 8 war-torn countries around the world. You can help a woman survivor of war transform her life today by visiting womenforwomen.org.uk/donate.